So, hello. My name is May Daalder. I sometimes like to abbreviate that to MD. I didn't even have to make the joke, but sounds like I was born with credentials, right? But in fact, I confess to being more of an artist than a neuroscientist or a psychologist. The strange thing is that this project right here kind of inspired me to go down the path of science and actually see whether an art project could potentially become a scientifically validated therapeutic tool. So this story, like so many, starts with solitude. This is me with the very first version of, this is called the Mirrorbox, and this is the very first version of the Mirrorbox. It was a simple design. It's reflective when there's more light outside, and it becomes transparent or translucent when there's more light on the inside. So one sunny California afternoon, I decided to take the Mirrorbox out for a little public intervention. I talked to people, and I tried to make conversation, but it turned out to be really difficult. So, I thought maybe I was being too confrontational. I was actually trying to come up with a metaphor for social connection. But as we all know, the self is a very delicate thing. So maybe that was part of the problem. So being a little disappointed at my public reception, I decided to just go back home and maybe try it out with someone who I knew well in an intimate environment. So we just played and looked at our reflection, the images that were created through this reflection. And we sort of fell into a trance after about 5 minutes. And then when she removed the box from her head, this is a very accurate description of what we were going through.
I still feel like you're in there, like in the eyes. It's like you're in here with me, That's how it feels.
But now I'm me and you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like now I inhabit two bodies.
Wow.
This is almost like it's like I haven't. Like I've just sort of
Yeah. Like the face is gone.
Yeah.
It feels like what's normally there in front of you is like the interface, like the thing in between is not there anymore. That's what it feels like. I think that's why it feels weird for me. I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah. So that night definitely inspired a minor shock in me. I mean, what was this? I had never felt anything like it before, and I certainly wasn't expecting it to happen that night. And it was dumbfounding to think that it could be so easy, just 5 minutes of staring into a half-transparent mirror, and there you are in someone else's body just about, inhabiting two people at once. I mean, it was crazy. And I quite honestly was a little bit scared initially, like, what is this that I've found? What could this possibly be? So it became clear that the design of the thing had to change, first of all. And it went from being a solitary unit to a kind of isolation chamber for two, an intimate space. And this is a preview of what it kind of looks like on the inside. This is an early version of the lighting program. And that's my dad and me. And yeah, I installed it at a performance festival in Los Angeles, and everybody really liked it, and then it continued to go to this place and that place. People were requesting it, and they all seemed to be having a kind of similarly euphoric experience with it, which inspired my scientific curiosity, and this is where I step into my role as a scientist. Charlie Chaplin once said that his character, the Grouch, was basically emerged from a random assortment of costume elements that came together. And my persona as a scientist kind of started out the same way. What's funny is that I actually picked up this dress from the costume area over there, so that's cool. So yeah, I mean, the questions that I was left with after this initial experience just seemed to demand a serious inquiry. Why was this illusion so emotional? And why hadn't I experienced this before? Was this some kind of a lost perception of collective perspective that was suddenly rushing back to me through this thing that I'd made? So I decided to try and quantify the experience. And I made surveys based on Timothy Leary's original LSD questionnaires, some from the Myers-Briggs personality tests, and the Baron-Cohen empathy quotient. And I wound up with a pile of surveys that I hardly knew what to do with. But among these surveys was some really valuable feedback. People seemed to be confirming that what I had felt originally was something that was generalizable. It was sort of maybe a statistical validation could be possible. People are saying they felt euphoric happiness, fluid identity, identity shift, other face more familiar, seeing split face on other faces, bliss, seeing anybody almost as myself, insides feel scrambly. So I took some creative liberties and drew up some scientific theories. But I don't think these should be cited in any textbooks. And that's where the story could have ended, with a sort of artistic interpretation of science based on this phenomenological experience that I had. But I had the good fortune of meeting a real neuroscientist from USC. And she was working on some pretty compelling science that she'll tell you a little bit about in this video.
In normal Western society, which is where people started studying the self, they find that there are regions in the brain that are only active when you think about yourself. And then when you think about other people, you have different regions that are active. But they found that when East Asians think about themselves, it's not just one person, one entity, but it's the whole, like a collective whole. So they've shown that you can prime this response. So if you're bicultural, like an Asian American, you can prime someone to think more collectively or think more individualistically, and that also changes the brain activation when thinking about self versus others.
So this is really cool stuff. I mean, basically this is part of a body of evidence that suggests that culture and the experiences that we have with other people and even just daily social contact can seriously transform who we are and transform how we understand ourselves in combination with others or next to others. So we decided to collaborate. I showed her the Mirrorbox and we both just got really fired up about our mutual interest in empathy, neuroplasticity in the future. So we decided to investigate together whether or not the Mirrorbox could in fact become a scientifically validated therapeutic tool. And our ambition was really that hopefully it could become a tool for diffusing prejudice, which I know is a very humble ambition. But, we took our first small step and designed a pilot study, which did show that actually the Mirrorbox does play some role in modulating self-perception. The original surveys that I did, the pseudoscientific surveys, that I showed you, in which I saw that people were still seeing themselves on other people's face. This was confirmed by our study through a face morphing task, where basically people were given 11 images of a morph between themselves and another person, and they were asked to rate what percentage of themselves was in each image. And after the Mirrorbox, they actually rated seeing themselves more in other people, so a higher percentage of themselves they saw in the other face. So that was cool. And then the second thing we did was an implicit association test. And I'm not really going to describe what exactly that is, but usually people have a positive bias towards themselves over others. So when they see positive words, they will associate those with self more quickly than they'll associate positive words with others. And what we wanted to see was that people maybe would begin to associate positive words with others as quickly as they did to themselves. The strange thing is, we saw that the Mirrorbox actually sort of just removed this positive bias towards self. So it leveled the playing field, but it didn't bring other into a more positive dimension. It just sort of like chopped self down to size. But that finding is something that we're going to continue exploring in a second pilot study. But it does kind of bring me back around to the beginning of this talk. And it brings me back to the self. Because ultimately what this project has taught me is that identity is fluid. But having a fluid identity can also be very vulnerable. And it's the same vulnerability that allows us to open up and have these incredible empathic experiences with other people, and also the vulnerability that threatens to shut us down and block us off from having input of other into our identity. So any future work that we do, where we try to put people in opposition together in the Mirrorbox and say, hey, let's try to work it out, really has to take that duality of empathy into account. So that said, you are all welcome to come try the Mirrorbox, come get vulnerable, let me know what you think, and enjoy yourselves. And that's it.